Next door to me is a building that we in the community call the Old Bakehouse. As the name suggests, is an old bakery long since gone out of business, and by the time I had bought and moved into my home, it had become a halfway house of sorts, used to house youngsters who were leaving the care system, so aged between 16 and 18. We were not aware of what the building was until the mortgage was already finalized, but with each viewing we had of our house, the place was always so quiet, and the people who lived there had already told us how well behaved and peaceful they were. A downright lie. I found out some years later that the reason they moved was because of that place, hence why they lied to us in order to sell and get away. So we never really considered, as young first-time buyers, that we were going to be in for a rough time. The place was manned 24/7 by social workers, read untrained agency people with little to no experience with troubled older teens with severe emotional problems, often self-medicated with drugs and or alcohol, and was supposed to be a center of learning where these teens would live for a time to get them ready for life within society, away from the care system. I totally sympathized at first. Everyone deserves to have a decent path in life. But it would always seem with each new kid brought into this facility, a whole new slew of problems would follow. The kids breaking into each other's apartments, and having the loudest, most obnoxious sex. There was a Saturday morning I was woken up to the sound of what I thought was geese flying overhead. It was not geese. And throwing their used condoms into my yard from their windows. Yes. I put on some marigolds, gathered them up, and delivered them personally to the person in charge each time this happened until it stopped. Constant drug use, which usually took place right outside our house while they sat in our front garden wall, and would then throw their extinguished spliffs into my rose bushes. Throwing other rubbish into our yard like old batteries, food packets, and sometimes food like boiled eggs, sometimes raw eggs too, when they were in the mood to cob them at the first floor windows. Fights breaking out between the residents, often resulting in the police and or ambulances being called out. They were honestly so bad, I'm surprised someone didn't actually get killed sometimes. An incident where a group of them thought it was a really funny idea to mix flour and water together and make a thick dough, and there was a lot of it, and throw it at passing buses. They could not understand why the police were called to this one. And one time a guy threw his standing vacuum cleaner out of his first floor window, jumped out after it, and proceeded to wield it as a club to smash the rest of the ground floor windows on the building in the middle of the night. Honestly, the list is endless, but these examples come to mind right now. I could honestly go on forever. These kids were just left to their own devices. There was no learning or activities for them. They were just put there and moved on when their time was up, bored and neglected all over again. I completely blame the city which ran this center for this, and told them more than once. They didn't care, clearly. Almost every day was a battle, and the mere concept of sleep at night was a treat at best. I've lost count of the amount of times I would turn into work and have a good cry in the toilet, because I was just so strung out and exhausted. No amount of blowing fans or white noise machines were enough to drown out the utter nightmare that was next door. I used to dread going home after work. It truly was hell on earth for the next 10 years. Me and my husband were kind of poor and living hand-to-mouth at the time, so moving out wasn't really an option. So we endured. Sometimes months would go by without incident, everything was calm, and there were moments where we actually got to talking with some of these kids, and they were fine, decent people who just wanted a better life. Until one would turn up and disrupt the balance, and all hell would break loose again for the following few months. And it was awful again, and just swings and roundabouts. Until the day they closed down the halfway house. It was an entire year of unbridled bliss. Where the place was completely empty. No noise, no fights, no nothing. But then the charity that owns the place decided to let the flats again. Just not under the guise of the halfway house. But they were housing similar kinds of people, just troubled, often mentally ill, and most of them drug addicts. I understand that these people need a place to go, but this time there wasn't even a social worker on site. So there was no monitoring, and the charity never visited once, as their new tenants slowly began to trash the place all over again. The entire street was stink of weed. I couldn't have any windows open in the summer because then my house would stink of it too. Parties and fighting again, kicking footballs into the side of my house. Sometimes this ball would come over my fence, and there was a 10-foot drop from my yard to theirs, so it was high. One time the ball ended up behind the back of my shed. I left it there, waiting for them to ask for it back. But the little scroats came onto my property to get it instead, and when I told them I knew they had it, which meant I knew they'd been trespassing, a few days later it reappeared in the exact same place. I threw the ball in the bin, and they never asked about it. Bear in mind, these weren't 16 to 18-year-olds anymore. They were somewhere between the ages of 20 to 40, so definitely not children, and definitely old enough to know better. Yes, I would go over there and kindly ask for them to behave and tone it down a bit. They would always apologize profusely, and then go right back to being crap bags the moment I closed my door. To be honest, it just got to a point where I was wasting my breath, and asking them to be a bit more respectful was actually more stressful than just putting up with it. Granted, it wasn't as bad as when it was a halfway house, but it was still bad enough for what the quality of life was. Pretty crap. I developed a terrible anxiety problem as a result that I still suffer from time to time at the sound of the slightest noise from that side. The behaviors changed, though, just before the holiday season last year. There were 4 people living there officially, and 1 sofa surfer unofficially, all with massive groups of friends who would come around every single day, hang out, listen to loud music enough that the bass would reverberate through my floor, smoke weed and sell it too. There was a drug pusher guy on a ratty motorbike that would pop by every day, pick up and ride off again, and a group of the lads had cuckooed one of the residents and were using his flat as a drug den. You might ask why I didn't call the police, the reason being that I felt I was too close to this already. Calling the police would elicit backlash, which I really did not want, nor needed, to be honest. These kids were not smart enough about it, though. They did this kind of thing in broad daylight, and would have loud conversations about their dealings and apparent STDs, but I'll spare you that one. So they would hang themselves one day without any help from me, or the risk of having a brick thrown through my living room window, but I digress. As Christmas approached, they all went quiet, like deadly quiet. It was quite wonderful, if a little bit spooky. Apart from at night, at around 7 p.m., when a fire would be started in their backyard, the flames usually between 10 to 15 feet high, because we could see them over our high fence, and they would burn for hours, like from 7 p.m. until around 11 p.m., sometimes later. And the fires would be a constant. Every single night, right up until about a week ago, they suddenly all just moved out. All of them. All at once. I assumed they had all been evicted from the property, or at least that's what I'd hoped. But 2 lads came back each night after that, apparently still in possession of a key to one of the ground floor flats, and would just hang out in the doorway. I only recognized one of them as the sofa surfer of the group, who lived there unofficially. I thought it was odd as hell, but they were quiet, so, not wanting to rock any boats, I didn't confront them about it. Well, this Thursday just gone, the police suddenly boarded up the whole complex, and I thought that was the end of it. The charity now wanted them out, and wanted them to stay out. The nightmare was over. At least for a little while, a bit of a reprieve before the next batch of tenants would inevitably be shipped in. No doubt these kids have utterly destroyed the inside of the flats, as people like that are wont to do. And the rubble of ash from their many bonfires is still there. I can only just make out a mattress, the base of a large punch bag. I actually watched them burn this in stages. They'd had it outside for a while, took a knife to it one time and repaired it by covering it in black gaffer tape, so the smell from the thing was bloody awful. And the shopping trolley all now reduced to this nasty black festering pile in the middle of their yard that can be seen from the road. Well, it's apparently not over. Those 2 from before were back today, ripping the boards off and trying to pry open the windows to gain entry to the building. My guess is they still have gear in the flats that they want to get out. I don't know at this point. I just don't understand their thought processes at all. And I just wish they'd give up and move on already. After 17 years of this hell, I've had enough. 2. For context, I live in a small city on a standard city block. Parking is an issue, but for the most part everyone is in agreement that the spot in front of your house is yours, especially if you have small children. Well, there is one house where they don't agree to this unspoken rule. That by itself would warrant nothing more than the thought that these people are a-holes. That's not where this story ends, though. It started around this time last year when they started taking everyone's spots after they would shovel them out. Everyone thought this was rude, but nobody said anything to them. We would just mutter amongst ourselves. Apparently, the neighbors caught wind of this. To give a little extra background, the entire family are trained in MMA and jiu-jitsu. They have won awards for fighting. The main issues of the family are the dad, who is around 45. He's a big, muscular man, and their teen son, who's around 18. We'll call the dad Dick and the son Darren. Well, Darren found out that people didn't like it that he was taking their spots. He starts doing obnoxious, petty things. Darren is always with him, joining in on the nonsense. He starts targeting 3 specific families. A young family in their early 20s with 2 small children, a 4-year-old and a newborn. An older couple in their mid-60s, and another elderly couple in at least their late 70s, if not early 80s. It starts small, like just parking all 3 of their cars in front of their houses so they can't park in front of them. But then escalates to him revving his motorcycle late at night to disturb them, just non-stop continuous bullying. Somehow he frames it in a way to make it so he's standing up for himself. Finally, the 60-year-old man snaps he's tired of the relentless bullying. He comes outside to confront Dick, but Dick doesn't like that. He grabs the old man and slams him into a car and punches him several times in the face. Obviously, police are called, but Dick tells him, "Officer, I just don't get it. He just came out freaking out and charging at me over parking spaces." So the police believe Dick is acting in self-defense, and ultimately the charges get dropped. There was another situation where they were bullying the 70-year-old couple. They live directly next door to them. Now, these people get it the most. They do things to these people like hang a huge middle finger flag pointed directly at their house. They also have their teenage son pee directly into their yard. There are many more examples, but I'm sure you get the idea. I'm including this just so you get a good idea of the kind of people they are. Now back to the parking fiasco. This continues and relentless bullying continues. But now their main focus is the young family, the dad Ralph and his wife June. After the incessant bullying, Ralph is fed up. He confronts Dick. Dick gets in his face and threatens Ralph. Well, Ralph tells him he's not scared of him and he just can't keep bullying the block. Luckily, Dick doesn't get physical with him, but he ups the amount of bullying. This continues until this past weekend. It all starts when we have a big snow. Well, naturally, Dick and his son are parked on either side of June's car. While they're shoveling their cars out, they're throwing all the snow onto June's car. This poor woman works as a hospice nurse. She's sweet and doesn't deserve this nonsense. Not to mention, needs to get in and out of her driveway every day with a newborn. Obviously, this sets Ralph off. Enter me and my family. I am also in my late 20s and have 2 small children, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. Ralph's family and my family are pretty good friends. I'm also friendly and have no issues with Dick and his family. I've even hung out with his wife on several occasions and done their older son's hair anytime he's asked. I have my cosmetology license. So the day of the big snow, after my husband shoveled our car out of the snow, a family friend had an emergency, so he needed to go help. Dick sees our spot is open and is closer to our house than Ralph's spot. So he pulls out of his and into ours. I don't know how it is most places, but here it is very rude to take someone's spot when they've just shoveled. I don't say anything to Dick because what's the point? Instead, I take a picture and send it to Ralph and say, "Look how rude, we just shoveled this spot." I was unaware of the fact that Dick had just thrown shovels of snow all over June's car. Ralph starts saying, "Ha, let's put snow in their cars." I say no, we should make the snow piled on either side of the car so big they can't get out. We just laugh and I think nothing of it. Fast forward about 4 hours, me and my daughter are doing some chores, and I ask her to please take a bag of trash out to the cans. She goes out but immediately runs back saying, "Mommy, 2 guys are fighting outside." I immediately know that it must be Dick and Ralph. I run outside and they are screaming in each other's faces. I know I won't be much help, so I run to get my husband, but by the time I get outside, everything is finished. My next-door neighbor is outside and informs me that Ralph threw the snow all over Dick and his son's car. Not only that, but he threw big fat shovels full of snow directly at their house. So Dick comes out and gets in Ralph's face. Ralph starts getting loud back, telling him that everyone is sick of him, including me. Well, Dick doesn't like that, so he starts punching Ralph in the face. After that, he chokes Ralph until he becomes unconscious. Of course, Darren is out there encouraging the issue and also getting in on the yelling. When Ralph wakes up, he tells Dick that he's going to call the police, but Dick begs him not to. Ralph tells him to go F himself and goes in the house. Now me and all the neighbors are outside watching as the police come and question all of us. Everyone is afraid to speak up against Dick, so Dick does the same song and dance. Ralph was just acting crazy over parking spots. Dick was acting in self-defense. The cops decided to charge Ralph with harassment. After the cops leave, I go in my house. I'm standing in my living room talking to my husband when I look over and see Dick just standing in front of our window staring at my house. When I make eye contact with him, he starts waving at me. I go out and ask if everything's okay. He starts slowly removing the snow from his car, saying, "I hear you don't like my parking spot, is that true?" I'm not about to lie, so I tell him no, I thought it was inconsiderate of them to take my spot right after we spent all of that time shoveling it out. But I had nothing to do with Ralph throwing the snow all over their cars and house. He starts telling me not to worry about consideration, because there won't be any of that anymore. He then threatens me and starts making fun of my weight. Of course, Darren is joining in with the nonsense. I just roll my eyes and go into my house and message his wife, who I thought was my friend, and would know me well enough to know I had nothing to do with the snow. I was wrong. She doubles down and tells me her family is the only one who doesn't act like children over the parking situation. L-O-bloody-L. Then her entire family blocks me. The next day, I call the cop that had come to question us. I tell him that not only did Dick start it by throwing snow all over Ralph's car, but that he has been relentlessly bullying Ralph for the past 2 years. I tell him that Dick immediately comes and starts threatening me after he left, and that everyone was too afraid to tell the truth because Dick was right there. The cop thanks me and tells me I did the right thing by waiting. I get a message later from Ralph that the charges were all dropped on him, and instead they hit Dick with 4 different charges, including harassment and assault. A small win. Well, now I have become the main focus of their bullying. There's no way they know I called the cop back, so this is all over me saying something they did was inconsiderate when it was inconsiderate. They started doing the 3-car park in front of my house, with little snide remarks. Now, I've seen how this song and dance goes. I refuse to deal with all this stupid nonsense that everyone else has been dealing with. My husband refuses to get involved, and is basically just telling me to let them bully us. No, absolutely not. I need ways to get back at them. I'm not allowing someone to bully me. It's just not happening. Now, I prefer these things to be legal and not traced back to me. I do have a camera at my front door and back doors. I don't know if that can be played in my favor. I also told my husband to park his boss's big giant truck in front of Dick's house. And if Dick does anything to his truck, that will backfire fast, because my husband's boss is a cop. So please give me some ideas. No matter how small and petty, I'm interested. Obviously, still legal. Hellfreezer's note, as you say, you have cameras, so you want to document everything that happens. Save the recordings, transfer them onto the police. And that's really the way forward. Just document and report, document and report. But the fact of the matter is, the problem has persisted for as long as it has, and it will continue to persist, because people aren't marshalling together, they're not banding together to deal with the problem. Therefore, he picks his victims, he focuses on the victim, and everyone else hangs back while that person's being harassed and bullied. They're just one family, you're many. They're really not powerful at all. They're only as powerful as the neighborhood lets them be. Best of luck with it, and I hope you're able to get them ousted in some way soon. 2. How to deal with difficult government agencies. I keep reading posts where people continue to report their neighbors from hell and nothing is ever done. So I thought I would share a technique learned many years ago when I was in the military. I found it to be extremely effective. 1. You have to research and know what laws or bylaws, ordinances, rules, etc. are being broken. You are not likely to get much traction if none were, or if you don't know. 2. Gather evidence. Keep a diary of events, neighbor from hell's actions, your actions and response, and when and who you notified. Complaints about your neighbor from hell blasting music at 2 a.m. may not get you very far, but if you can show a video or a picture of a decibel meter between a clock and a glass of water with ripples in it, that's different. If you produce a doorbell video of your neighbor from hell screaming, "Get out of here, I'm gonna F you up," I'll bet a court will take notice. If you complain about your neighbor ripping down your fence, include a property survey and pictures. Without evidence, it's easy for authorities to ignore you. 3. Safeguard evidence and all documents. Obtain copies of all police reports if any pertain. Keep everything in a safe place. Never release or give out your originals or last copy of something. Only ever provide a copy from your files. If you think your life might be in danger, or evidence stolen and destroyed, send a copy to someone you trust in a different state or country. 4. While you're gathering evidence, also do what you can to mitigate damages and impacts, protect yourself and others, and de-escalate the situation if possible. Include this in your diary and timetable. 5. Write a letter or email to the government agency having jurisdiction or responsibility to act. Attach a copy of evidence, police reports, and diary and timetable. Specify what laws were or are being broken and by whom. Include your desired outcome and expected time of resolution. You have to give the agency a reasonable amount of time to act and solve the problem. But don't give them too much or they'll forget about you. Get everything into written form. Phone calls allow agencies to stall or claim they were never informed. 6. When the agency fails to act or no resolution is achieved, write them again. Shorten the time you're giving them this time. Include the previous letter or letters as enclosure and attachment, basically a copy of everything you sent them before. With this one and all future letters and emails pertaining to the matter, send them with tracking. USPS tracking works well, or return receipt. By doing this, you're eliminating the possibility they can claim ignorance and, this is very important, send a copy, CC, to their boss, also with tracking or return receipt. You don't need to send all the evidence to the boss yet, as your goal at this point is to give a heads up. 7. Still no action or resolution. Write the boss. Shorten the time even more. Include a copy of all the evidence plus previous letters. Send it out with tracking and this is very important, fill out the CC portion of the letter with the boss's name. And obviously send the copy as well. Again, you don't have to send the boss's boss a copy of all the evidence yet. 8. Start working your way up the chain of command or food chain using number 6 and 7 as guides. Rinse and repeat technique. You are creating evidence as you go, proving the lower levels were notified and failed to resolve the problem. And they can't claim they didn't know because you've got the tracking numbers that say otherwise. 9. Never complain to a lower level. For example, if your neighbor from hell is a sheriff's deputy, do not start with your local police. Go directly to Sheriff's Office Internal Affairs, State Police, State AG's office, or even the FBI. 10. Do not be afraid to jump to a higher jurisdiction, a person, agency, when you've reached the top. Example, after reaching the Chief of Police, continue on to City Council and Mayor, or jump to State Police, State AG's office, etc. 11. When you reach elected officials, guess who the mayor answers to? The governor? Your congressmen and senators? Yep, they all answer to the voters. How do you notify the voters? through your local media, TV, radio station, newspaper, internet sites, etc. It helps if elections are nearing. Even pointing out in a letter when one is up for re-election will get their attention. But you'd better have good hard evidence if you reach that high, and especially before going to media. I found it's usually better to ask questions than throw accusations. Examples. Are laws being selectively enforced? Are city officials prejudiced against such and such? Would you allow your children to play in this yard? See enclosure number 1. Number 1 is a picture of a lawn next to a fence with clumps of dog feces thrown there by a neighbor from hell. Would you consider 82 dB excessive? Used when city ordinance, number 12 to 567, only states, excessive noise prohibited. With enclosure pictures showing a reading between 82 decibels on meter between clock showing 12:23 a.m. And a glass of water with major ripples in it. Shouldn't I be able to feel safe walking to my car in the morning? Enclosure number 2 is 12 pictures on 2 pages, obviously all taken on different days, of neighbor from hell's pit bull clearly off leash in the front yard, taking dumps next to a car. I think you get the idea. No actual accusations were made, just questions asked. I hope you all enjoyed reading it and gained a valuable tool you can use when government agencies try to ignore your stall. Often they don't want to get involved in neighbor disputes, so evidence and documentation are key. I hope this helps. 3. We live in an apartment building with 100+ units. Property management company has changed twice in the 10 years we've been here. Now it's a larger company that manages properties along the East Coast. Our issue is with maintenance. It's an entire family of people who do nothing except create and exacerbate problems. First there was one guy who was just kinda crummy at maintenance and would never finish a project, but always market completed at the office. We are all friendly, so we cut him slack for a long time. Then his father moves into the building and starts helping with maintenance, or half-finished repairs everywhere, the building halls, and property looks like crap. Then his son moves in and gets on maintenance payroll. Just this last summer, the kid has been chased around our property twice by police, and is overdosed in our first-floor common area. He is also not allowed to have keys to the apartment doors as he's been accused of theft multiple times. We've watched him and called him out about thieving from people at the pool and in group settings right in front of us. None of this gets reported to the main property management company for whatever reason, and we could not get a hold of the person who is above our in-office property manager. We've called, emailed with no response, and waited for her at our holiday party she was supposed to show up to, but never did. Wonder why. This is where it gets particularly dicey. Now, the middle original guy has been promoted to regional manager, so he is literally never around. His sister and niece get an apartment in the building, whatever. Then his daughter gets an apartment here too. They let her skip a couple of months' waiting list and upgraded all of her countertops and carpeting before moving in. Remember, the absolute bare minimum is being done elsewhere for maintenance, let alone upgrades. Still super annoying, but fine. We're all friendly and the rent is cheap for everything we get, so I've tried to ignore it all. We have one maintenance guy who is not in their family, and he does excellent work. We call him when we need help in our unit, and he always gets it done, so I've tried to ignore the rest. Side note, now the entire family is going after the solo maintenance guy, trying to get him fired because he puts their work to shame. If he leaves, absolutely nothing is going to get done anymore, and I'm a little nervous at this point. It's easier for the property management company to replace one person than it is to replace the grandfather, son, and grandson. They have no idea the reality of this situation is that the solo guy does more and far better work than the other three combined. Well, recently we are having a party at our neighbor's unit, and we invited everyone, including the sister of the middle maintenance guy, who is also the daughter of maintenance guy 2, aunt of maintenance guy 3. Neighbour's door is locked, and we're all hanging out when the doorknob starts jiggling. He gets up to open it, and he's not even halfway there when the door swings open. It's Maintenance 1's sister holding a key. She tells us that she has a copy of M1's master key, and to let her know if we ever get locked out, but to keep it on the low. This is where I draw the line. This is a safety issue to the highest extent. We have had so much vandalism, destruction, and theft on the property that gets blamed on residents or the neighborhood kids. Yet mysteriously every time it happens the cameras are turned off or aren't working. I 1000% believe it is M3, and whether or not he was actually given a key to units or it was taken away or whatever, it is clear that his entire family has master keys and they are easy to make copies of. I found the HR department email for the entire property management company on LinkedIn, but if I send an email, chances are, 1, nothing is going to get done, especially if I send it anonymously. 2, if anything does happen, the maintenance family is going to know that it was someone in my friend group who ratted and they will retaliate. 3, even if they got rid of the maintenance family, they still have multiple family members living in the building. Aside from move out, what can I do? Hellfreezer's note. Essentially what you can do is document. I would get a camera for the inside of your apartment for when you're out, something that can monitor the door, see who's coming and going. I'd hide it so that it's not obvious, so if anyone does come into your apartment, they can't, take the SD card out or however it works. But you should also make that report. You should report to everyone. The previous story there gave tips about dealing with government agencies, but I think those tips are universal for dealing with any sort of organization. So, CC everybody, send any evidence you have, like the person said. And above all, make sure it is established clearly that this is a family. It's a family that has access, and that the one maintenance guy they're trying to drum out of the place does more work than the 3 that they're keeping employed combined. So it would actually behoove them in the long run to get rid of the 3 maintenance guys and their family members, kick them out, and replace them with one other guy. Everything would probably get repaired more and it would save them money. That might be where you get them on this. Make it a smart business decision that they actually finally have to do something. 5. I just had to share this story somewhere because it is a beautiful display of karma that actually didn't take that long. My wife and I moved into our very first apartment, our own place, back in October of 2024. Now, most of our neighbors are actually fine. We don't talk to them or make friends, but they don't give us any issues. I should also note for context, our apartments recently got a new manager after years of having a very neglectful one before we moved in, so things are basically improving and getting whipped back into shape. Our one neighbor, who lives not directly across from us, but just one door down, on that opposite side, always gave us sketchy vibes in the short amount of time we've lived here. She had a hideous doormat that said, "Come back with a warrant." And one time I heard her out on the patio, talking on the phone super loudly.
"They're profiling me. Even the sheriff thinks so."
Like, okay, lady, not sure why you think the whole complex needs to hear your dirty laundry, but go off. She has 2 kids. A 4-year-old boy who plays with stones, he throws them all over the breezeway path and it's never cleaned up. And a monster of a teenage daughter we had an issue with. To briefly explain the incident, the daughter's big truck was sitting parked in the middle of the parking lot and was blocking all of the spaces. My father-in-law and I had been returning from a short Walmart trip, and we had nowhere else to park other than this neighbor's spot, so we pulled in, took not more than 2 minutes to unload, and here comes the teenage daughter, instantly has a snotty attitude. "You can't park there, that's my mom's spot." And when I explained to her about the truck blocking the way, the little bitch flips me off and drives away in it. I confront the mother, and while she told me she would talk to her daughter, it didn't really seem like much was going to be done. She just acted really weird. Like she wasn't all there. Another detail I should note is they had a Ring camera and one of those fancy button code devices on their door. We live in a small country town, not a city. No one else has these types of things on their doors. Then things got even weirder. She started letting a neighbor's cat inside her house. The cat clearly didn't want anything to do with her, and was fast to run out the back, upstairs where he lives. And she began to stare rudely out her window at my wife. My wife walks with a cane due to an injured knee that hasn't healed, and this woman would just gawk at her like she was some circus freak. It annoyed me so much that I almost knocked on her door and questioned her about it. We decided not to unless it happened again. Well, fast forward to last week. My wife and I were at home. It was evening, and we heard a loud knocking on one of our neighbors' doors with the infamous, "Please, open up." We were able to see from our patio it was indeed the weird neighbor. To say we're laughing our butts off inside our apartment was an understatement. She was arrested, and we found out the following. She is a repeat offender. She was arrested in a town nearby a few years back and served jail time for using meth and child endangerment. She was charged this time with drug possession and distribution, child endangerment, illegal possession of a firearm, due to being a convicted felon. On one hand, it saddens me such trash lives in our otherwise peaceful little town. On the other, I'm glad she's gone. With the new manager, it's unlikely she'll be allowed to remain living here, even if she somehow gets the charges dropped. Our lease is very strict about criminal behavior. Hoping we don't see her or her bratty kid again anytime soon. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Naughty Neighbours episode 29. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you'd be so good. And if you'd like to support the channel, well, the ways you can do that are quite easy. You can support me on my Patreon page. You can leave a donation by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath the video. And you can also buy merchandise. There are links in the description for that. None of that is ever required. The videos are here for your enjoyment, but I do appreciate the support and it does help. Okay, that's me done pimping myself out, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And this is actually inspired by the last story there. I'm curious, how many of you have Ring doorbells, or not necessarily a Ring doorbell, but like a video doorbell? I've been considering getting one myself. It's something I would like, just for the convenience of yelling at delivery people when they try to take my packages away instead of leaving them where I've told them to. But let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Naughty Neighbours 28, and it was what is the most played thing on your year-end or your year in review playlist if you use music streaming platforms. And today's answer comes from Patrick Lassiter. 1. Omnet Ozken. My beat goes Imagine Dragons, Thunder, Hugh, or Who, Wolf Totem. Thank you very much for your answers, Patrick Lassiter. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.